I'm Nadia I'm co-chair of the Holyoke Cultural Council.
I am Chris. I am new to the council.
I'm Coco, and I'm the treasurer.
My name is Tim Damon, a longtime member of the council.
Awesome, excellent. And my name is Ann Tallheimer. I'm the current co-chair, and I will be leading this workshop. Cool. All right, so let me hand the microphone back to Nadia, who's going to take charge. And feel free to have a seat, and I'll just go over some of our slides. These will be available later on our Facebook page as well. Our goal with this quick workshop is basically to go over a little bit of what the Cultural Council is and does, how it works, and things that you might need to know as you think about applying. So this is our basic agenda for today. Council basics, the grant process, application review, like what is it and how does it work? Then I got a grant, what do I do now? Which I enjoy. And then we'll field any questions, or we can break into small groups, we can break into discussion. Sometimes we've done that in the past where folks are like, I want to pitch an idea. All of these are fine. Okay, so here's the short version. The Holyoke Local Cultural Council is a program of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, which is a state agency. The LCC program is the largest grassroots cultural funding network in the nation, which is pretty rad. And it supports thousands of community-based projects in the arts, humanities, and sciences annually. And this is part of why it's the Holyoke Local Cultural Council instead of just like the Holyoke Cultural Council, because we are a program of the MCC. Everything that we do is in service of this grant program. That is our entire mission as a council. And so there are 329 councils across the Commonwealth, serving all 301 Massachusetts cities and towns. Some of the smaller ones have to share. So each year, local councils award more than $7 million in grants to more than 5,000 cultural programs statewide. So local cultural councils receive funding based on population, and this year the state budget was level funded, so we will have the same amount of funding as we did in prior years. Who makes up the local cultural council? We're all volunteers. We are appointed by the mayor, and we work with his office. So, all right, if you're just coming in for the Cultural Council workshop, come on in and have a seat. We are just getting started. So here's, this should be 2024 funding. Sorry about that. So here's the timeline of the funding, right? The applications are open now. They opened on September 1st, and they are going to run through October 17th. They have to be submitted online through the Massachusetts Cultural Council application portal. There are no exceptions to this. This is a Massachusetts rule. In November, council members, we will meet up to 4 times to review the applications and vote on the grants. And then late December to early January, notification letters are mailed. You'll get a packet if you get a grant. In that packet, you'll also have some paperwork. I brought extra copies because people lose their paperwork. But you will need to hang on to and submit some of that paperwork in order to get your money. Grants are distributed as reimbursements following your program, your event, or activity. We do not pay upfront. We are not a direct granting organization, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The primary one is that we have a fairly high rate in Holyoke. About 30%, 30 to 35% of projects do not complete for whatever reason. And there are lots of reasons why that might happen. Maybe a venue closes, someone moves, interest wanes in a project, maybe the grant wasn't enough funding in the first place, but there are lots of reasons why that some of those programs just don't happen. If we did direct granting, we would have sent out an award with a letter, and then if the grant didn't happen, we would have to chase you down to get the money back, which is a bummer. So we are still a reimbursement activity, and we'll talk a little bit later on about how to do what are called third-party payments. Because most frequently what happens is folks are like, but I'm applying for a grant because I don't have the money, right? So we'll talk about how to work with a third-party payment. So general types of grants. Often folks are like, what can we fund? They could be a lot of different things. Standard grants do things like projects or operating support for an organization or ticket subsidy programs, artist residencies, fellowships, other activities in the arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences, field trips, arts, humanities, and interpretive science field trips for children in grades pre-K through 12. And this can be affiliated with any type of school, public school, a nonprofit, a religious homeschool, or community organizations, right? So if you have a group and you want to take them to a museum for something awesome, you could potentially get a grant from the Holyoke Local Cultural Council to cover the cost of those things, including the most significant expense for field trips, the bus. Who can apply? Applicant eligibility, you have to reside or be located in Massachusetts. You cannot have funding for a field trip outside of Massachusetts, for example. And the applicant or person leading the project or the program should have been engaged in the kind of activity we're talking about for which funds are requested for at least 1 year. Individuals can totally apply for a grant. You have to show that there's a public benefit that results from the project that you're applying for, but individuals can apply. Incorporated private nonprofit organizations, 501(c)(3)s, nonprofit preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, subject to the same criteria and restrictions as public schools. But basically, folks, if you are thinking of an interesting project that you might want to do, you should apply. Unincorporated associations that can establish a nonprofit objective. So a community band, for example, or a theater group. You're not a nonprofit, but you want to do something awesome, you can totally apply, right? Public schools, libraries, other municipal agencies, and including the local cultural council. If you've been in Holyoke for a while, you might have remembered the Holyoke Latin Jazz Fest, which was a program that we did. So I feel like I should also say the Gold Star Award-winning Holyoke Latin Jazz Fest. So you don't have to be a nonprofit, right? You don't have to be an organization. You could be a person who wants to do an art thing that has public benefit. You're eligible, right? And religious organizations are absolutely entitled to apply for funding of cultural programming that's available to the public. Again, our hallmark on this is public benefit. LCCs can only approve applications that are primarily cultural in their intent and don't have the effect of advancing religion. That is kind of a statewide thing. So we're talking about these terms like arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences, and this is basically what we mean. So arts refer to the creation of work in the crafts and performing, visual media, folk design, literary, and interdisciplinary arts. We define this very broadly, and you should as well, right? Presentation and preservation of and education about works in these disciplines. If folks are interested, we also have a list, and I'll pass these out when we get through the slides, of what we funded in 2023. And there are a lot of different projects that we funded across Holyoke. Humanities, types of learning that deal with human values and aspirations, human thought and culture, language and creativity, history, social studies, philosophy, criticism, and literature. So again, think broadly about humanities. And then interpretive sciences, types of learning that deal with nature, science, and technology in ways that explain how they relate to people's lives. Some organizations that conduct this type of activity include things like aquariums, botanical gardens, natural history museums, planetariums, and science centers. And think broadly about, like, what could this look like for Holyoke? What kinds of things? If it has public benefit and you're interested in doing it, it is potentially fundable. So what is eligible for grant funding? I keep saying public benefit. This is our main thing. It has to have public benefit. It has to contribute to the cultural vitality of the community as a whole rather than benefiting any single private individual or group. It's got to be open to the public. And that doesn't mean that it has to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming, just that it is open to the public and it has public benefit. Activities funded by local council should be available to the general public by exhibit, performance, etc. Right? We do have this thing about no substitution that's preventing LCC funds from substituting or replacing other public funding that the town or city should be responsible for. LCCs don't fund salaries or stipends for city employees, and there are some rules around capital expenditures for municipal agencies. If this applies to you, definitely come ask us specific questions. And then, of course, we have a pretty robust non-discrimination policy. In accordance with state law, local councils may not discriminate against applicants on the basis of race, gender, religious creed, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, sexual orientation, or age, nor may they fund projects that discriminate on the basis of these attributes. All events and programs funded by LCCs must also be accessible to persons with disabilities. And we find this very important, right? When we say public benefit and public access, we mean it. We want it to be able and open to anybody who might want to attend. Here's what you cannot fund. No food. and I mention this every year, this is a state rule, and I don't know why it's a state rule, but you cannot fund food and you cannot fund beverages. Sometimes we run into sticky problems with this because if you're teaching an after-school program for teenagers, they're hungry. You want to feed them. We cannot fund that, unfortunately. And that goes like broadly to like, if you buy chocolates for them to snack on, we cannot fund that. So no food, no beverages. Cannot do that. There are some restrictions around scholarships. Individual students are not eligible to apply for scholarships. An organization can apply to an LCC to sponsor a scholarship, but again, open and fair review and award process, and there has to be some kind of public benefit. And these restrictions about scholarships are shifting a little bit, but I will say that in my time on the council, I don't think that we've ever had an application come up for this, in large part because the organizations most interested in doing scholarships kind of already do it on their own. And it's not necessarily something that is funded. And there are restrictions around capital expenditures. And those are things that are, it's an item or a group of items with a life expectancy of more than 3 years, and it costs more than $500. So if someone was applying for $1,000 to buy a laptop for their research, that might get us into capital expenditure territory. We tend as a council not to fund those things as much as things that are events that are open to the public. Some local guidelines. Again, I should have updated this. This should be 2024 instead of 2023. I'm thinking this year and not next year. So for the Holyoke Local Cultural Council, the thing for which you're hoping to get funding needs to happen between January 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024, right? So we go by the calendar year in Holyoke. Restricted to individuals and organizations based in Massachusetts. Field trips have to be to destinations within the state. We do want you to have at least a conversation and a relatively secured venue at the time of application. Think of the difference between an application that says, I would like to have a concert in Holyoke. Holyoke's a pretty big city. That could happen pretty much anywhere. Versus, I would like to have a concert at the public library. And then they include a letter of support from the public library. All right? That letter of support is not required, but it will definitely strengthen your application. Occasionally, we will get applications that say, oh, I want to bring my band to Holyoke. Can you help us find a venue? We do not do that. That is entirely on the grant recipient to figure out. The more work you do ahead of time to sort of say, okay, I've got this idea and I've got this project and I've got some groundwork down, I just need the money. That's where we come in, is the money part, right? You do have to submit your applications online. And the MCC does have translation services available if you were submitting not in English. We also do encourage people to go in to the application, copy those questions, paste them into a Word document, do your writing in that Word document, and then other translation you might need to do from that Word document, and then copy and paste it back into your application. Because the application will also time out. If you get in there and you're composing, it'll time you out and it does not auto-save. I know, I make that same face every year. Go in, register for an account, look around the application, grab those questions, copy it into a Word document or something else, work on it over here, and then when you're ready, copy and paste it back into the document before you submit it. That is, bar none, the best recommendation we can offer. As for funding priorities, we at the Holyoke Local Cultural Council, we like to spread the money around as much as we can. We try to provide some funding to as many qualified programs and projects as possible. We don't want to be the sole source of financial support for your program. We want to provide a little seed money to help get you started, but we're also looking for you to have in-kind donations or other donations or support from other community organizations as well. Local council support is not intended to be used as the sole source of funding for projects of a continuing nature. Most projects receive only partial funding. It is very, very rare that we fund something in full. And we try to taper down our support across consecutive years. And after 3 consecutive years, we tend to either taper down or end support. It's hard to say, like, absolutely we do this every time it's exactly this, because different programs change from year to year. For example, one of the things that we often fund are productions at Holyoke High School. Often it is a different group of students, often it is a different performance. But we also look at the applications, and we also look at how much funding do we have to give out? How many applications do we have? What kind of projects are happening? We, of course, support projects that demonstrate a clear public benefit. Bar none, we are looking for clear public benefit. Emphasis is placed on supporting local artists presenting work in Holyoke. One of the things that we often talk about when we review grants is, how does this benefit Holyoke? Because you can apply to a cultural council anywhere, right? So a Holyoke resident could apply to the Northampton Cultural Council. And we often get applications from folks who are doing things in other places. And our question for us in Holyoke is, how does this benefit Holyoke, right? Think about the difference between a program that happens in Amherst that doesn't really have a connection to Holyoke versus a program where maybe Holyoke students are going to Amherst to watch a documentary film. One has clear public benefit to Holyoke, one not so much, right? So that's one of the things that we're considering when we review these applications. And again, funding is made available to the widest range of community cultural needs possible. We try to fund a little bit for as many good projects as we can, as many qualified eligible projects, rather than sinking full money behind one or two things. Every year we do community surveys. And so these are the results of our most recent community survey, our current funding priorities. And this doesn't mean that we don't fund outside of these things. We definitely do. But when we're determining like what kind of moves up the list or like different emphasis, this is what we've got. And they are in ranked order. So in our most recent community survey, public events like concerts or festivals was kind of the top choice. Folks were encouraged to pick 4, followed by field trips for students to museums or performances, arts education in the schools, and support for community arts and cultural organizations. If your project does not happen to fall into one of these 4 kind of buckets, that doesn't mean you can't get funding. All right, this is just our kind of priorities and not an absolute list. These are examples of some of what previous grant applications have looked like. Usually it'll ask for applicant information and contact information, checking off different eligibility requirements, and they're often very short answers. Is there any way to make that? Very possibly, but I also have printouts that if people want to take those with them later on, this is also up on our Facebook page, so people can kind of get in there and make larger. Yeah, I understand. It is very small type. The reason I wanted to sort of show it rather than digging into what a previous response wrote was to show you the length of the answers. They are short, right? So you have like 800 characters to summarize your proposed project, right? And we don't read for like perfect grammar. We're looking for good ideas, right? Don't stress out. I say this all the time too, like this is the least stressful grant application that you're gonna do, because you kind of pitch your project with a budget, and then you don't actually have to do grant reporting. If you have had other grants, you have to send in this and send in your metrics and proof of that. We don't require any of those things. We just require proof that the project happened and that you credited the MCC and that your expenses are eligible. That's it, right? So summarize the proposed project. What's the target audience for your project? What's the cost of participation for attendees, if any? How does the proposed project provide public benefit? We talk all the time about public benefit. We're going to ask you, how does it provide public benefit? Who's involved? What are their qualifications? Anybody else involved with it? And how are you going to promote it? How are you going to get the word out about what you're doing? All right, projected expenses. So you basically need an idea, how it benefits, and a budget. You will need to submit a budget. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Like the one that we're looking at is like stipends, space rental, marketing, supplies, expenditures, other expenses. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, question?
When you say supplies, that sounds different than if somebody, for instance, is applying for a supply such as a camera
Yes. So in those cases where supplies is sort of an amorphous big thing, right? Often when we're thinking about supplies is like nuts and bolts of the thing that you're going to need to make your project happen. If it's something specific like a camera lens or a piece of equipment, you'd want to enter that as a line item, particularly if it's something that might be getting into like capital expenditures territory. Yeah. Supplies are like pens and pencils, markers, like glue sticks, depending on your project. So like if you're doing a zine workshop, your supplies is going to be sort of this like, okay, like $400 for supplies. And that supply is going to be like pens, pencils, paper, glue sticks, staples, scissors, bits and bobs and that kind of thing. If your project is, if you're doing something like an improv performance, maybe supplies for that is like a box of different surprise props that somebody has to pull something out of for a show. Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule about what supplies is. It's going to depend for the project, but it's a little bit of a catch-all term for like, what do you need to make this project happen in terms of physical objects versus like marketing or posters or this or that or the other. Awesome. Similarly, another application, again, quick descriptions, 800 characters to summarize the proposed project, etc. And again, short answers, they're really short. Part of the other reason why it's good to take these things, cut and paste them and work on them in another document is that Word document will give you your word count. Because I hate being like, this will tell you like, okay, you've got 100 more words on this thing. Because the online form will cut you off. Like it will not let you type further. And again, you see more of budgets. All right, so that kind of covers sort of the nuts and bolts. And then we get to like, yay, I got funding. What do I do now? You're gonna get an award packet, right? There's a letter in it. You'll also get different forms for processing your reimbursement. When you get that letter, save that stuff because you're gonna need it later. Holyoke has a requirement that you need to have a vendor ID number. Once you've done that paperwork, you don't have to do it again. But for first-time grant recipients, this part can be like, I need to get a what? So there's a little bit of submission work that has to come along with that. So when you get that letter, save it. You'll need those forms. Also, promotion and credit. All promotional materials, websites, programs, banners, etc., have to credit the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the Holyoke Local Cultural Council. You can download the logo from the website. When you turn in your reimbursement request, just if you have like a picture of the website or a program from the event that you did that says, thank you, Massachusetts Cultural Council, that's good enough for us. But we do want the MCC and the HLCC to be credited. Because that's how people find out about us. Like, oh, how'd you get grant money from these folks, right? Again, we talk about reimbursement, not pre-reimbursement. You're going to send a reimbursement form. It'll come in your packet with receipts, a W-9, the vendor application. You can actually do the vendor application at any time. And then proof of proper promotion to the mayor's office. Please keep Xerox copies of everything for your records because things get lost, mail gets lost. We have a mailbox in the basement of City Hall, but sometimes it ends up in other people's mailboxes and folks are like, where's my money? It sometimes, can go astray. And then the check will arrive in 4 to 8 weeks because it comes in, we process it through, we track it, it goes to the auditor's office, we make sure that everybody's got all the forms, all that stuff. It is not a speedy process, but it is a consistent one. So final thoughts, the application link, again, if you go to Holyoke Local Cultural Council on Facebook, all of these things are linked there as well as these slides. The deadline is October 17th. And this is the part where we usually open the floor to questions. And so this part can feel a little less formal than sort of, hey, look at all these slides. If you have a project that you want to pitch, or if you want to kind of talk about an idea, now is a good time. And we have other members of the Cultural Council in the audience as well. So if folks wanted to ask a question, we can keep recording, or we can kind of turn off the recording at this point and then just get into our conversations. How would folks like to proceed? Yeah, let's do it. Do you mind speaking into the microphone so that we can get it for the recording? And if you'd like to introduce yourself, you're welcome to.
Hi, I'm Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
Regarding the venue,
Mm-hmm.
what would be considered considered a venue? Could it be someone's residence that they opened up to?
Yeah, if it's somebody's, if it's I'm thinking about, so East Hampton is doing this like porch performance thing, which is kind of a neat idea, right? So if your project was something like that, and it was, we're going to do performances on the on the porches of different people, yeah, that could totally be a venue.
Okay, it doesn't have to be a business.
It does not have to be a business. Depending on where it is in Holyoke, you may need different like permits. You may need to contract with different city departments for that. But yeah, it definitely doesn't have to be a business. It doesn't have to be anything so formal as like theater or any such thing. Yeah, that is a super good question. Coco, do you have a question as well, or do you want to add a comment? And again, we're just going to keep passing the mic so that way the recording can pick it up.
I just wanted to highlight that all the events have to be accessible. So if you have an event in your home, it has to be accessible to the public, and it has to have a public benefit. We never want to forget that everybody has to be able to get in regardless of their mode of transportation.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And to sort of dovetail on that as well, like if you're looking for interpretation services or ASL interpretation, that is totally fundable. That is totally potentially fundable. Pamela Means, who has been a previous year grant award winner, has a line item for an ASL interpreter for her performances as well. So definitely keep that in the mix as your projects.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I know you went through this.
Yeah.
I may have been spacing out when you said this.
No worries.
Does it have to be, can it be a thing? Can it be, but the funding is for an end product?
Yeah.
Be it like a kind of book or?
Potentially, yes. So again, the public benefit. So thinking about like if you were looking for a grant for a book, if that is a book that is going to be provided for free, or if there's going to be a book release and then a reading, that is potentially fundable. If it's a grant to create a book that you are then going to sell, that might be less fundable. But thinking about it broadly in terms of art, like if the grant is to create a series of paintings that are then going to be on display, or a work of sculpture, or a book, or a website or something, potentially fundable, yes. Absolutely. I mean, I try never to say never other than like food and beverage, because it depends on the grant, and it depends on the idea, and it depends on the thing, and how does it have public benefit, and how does it benefit Holyoke. But in the abstract, yes, these are potentially fundable things. Other questions, other points, or if other folks from the council want to jump in and talk about your experience having reviewed grants in the past, or things that have stood out to you about this process. Because this is kind of our big show for the year. This is like the thing that we do. I actually have a question. Sure. Can we pass the mic to the back?
Thanks, Nadia. Chris from the council, but
Hello, Chris from the council.
Hi. Do you want to see in the grant just the portions of the project that is looking for reimbursement, or the entirety of the cost of doing the project?
Ah, that is an excellent question. So when you submit the grant, generally it is more, I think, favorable, and other folks on the council can kind of speak to this as well, if we understand the totality of the project. Rather than saying, I'm doing a project and I just need $100 for this one piece. If it's sort of, you tell us about the scope of the project and then what you're looking for funding for. So yeah, I think it can depend. I mean, I don't think that we would turn away a grant application if someone submitted something like, oh, this is just for one piece of this larger other thing. We would be curious about what the rest of the other thing is, but yeah, thinking about, for example, if there's like a poetry festival, and somebody applies for like a certain amount to bring in one certain speaker, and they're like, okay, we're doing a poetry festival, but this is just to bring this one person in. Potentially fundable, right? I should also mention that people can apply for multiple grants. So for example, if you were doing a poetry festival and you wanted to apply for 4 different grants to bring in 4 different poets, totally fundable, totally possibly fundable. We in Holyoke don't have restrictions for the number of grants that people can submit. And part of that is also because we have a lot of different organizations that operate as what are called fiscal agents. And so you might see a certain organization at the helm of like 10 or 15 different grants, but because, the print shop is working as the fiscal agent for this organization, and Holyoke Media is working as the fiscal organization for this organization. What we're looking at is the content of the grant, not necessarily like which group or which organization is getting how much money from which thing. Because again, remember, we try to spread as much money around as we can. Yeah, Tim.
To Chris's question, Tim from the Cultural Council, it does, for me anyway, it helps to have the big picture overview of what an applicant wants to accomplish with their grant. It's easier for folks on the council to get excited about a project.
That's true.
With the more information we have, within the better, to have a clear picture of what the applicant hopes to envision and accomplish.
Yep. Yeah. I will say also, like, don't feel like you have to have every single thing sorted out to apply. Like, you don't have to have, like, this person is definitely coming and I'm doing this and it's going to last for this long and this kind of. Sometimes we get grants that are like, I'm going to pitch this idea and we're going to do a couple of things and we're still working out a couple details. That's pretty normal too. So, yeah, I think, at least for me, this is the most exciting time of year, because then you get this neat snapshot of all these cool things that are coming up in the future in Holyoke. And there's so much interesting stuff going on. Like, if you look at our 2023 funding list, like the projects we funded for this year, there's this huge, wide array of different programs and events and different things going on, which I think is awesome. And then all these other things pop up in Holyoke that are also cool and awesome. I'm like, why didn't you apply for a grant? And they're like, oh, yeah, we forgot about that. I'm like, don't forget. Now's the time. I feel like everything between now and the middle of October is like, did you apply for your grant yet? Did you apply for a grant? Did you get are you going to do this? Because you should do this. Tim, do you have the free money badge on? We got these, mine is in the car, but we got these badges from Jen Boyle, who was on the council a mighty while ago, and they're basically pins that say, ask me how to get free money. Because this is literally the free money. Tim, can you walk in front of the camera and be like, this one's for you, Jen?
This is part of what we do. So reach out if you have any idea that you think, however out there it might be. Reach out. It might be fundable.
We like the weird. I mean, well, okay, I like the weird, but we've done some really cool projects, and so this is that time where if you're like, oh, I wonder if we could do like a 24-hour comics festival in Holyoke. Yeah, that's totally potentially fundable. I wonder if we could do this. I wonder if we could do that. Like, yeah, you probably could. It's probably fundable. So, yeah. Other questions? If anyone wants to sort of like talk about an idea they might have or something kicking around the brain. Cool. All right. Well, we'll hang out. We have handouts. We have lots of information. I do want to mention that Nadia also printed up. Oh, yeah, go for it.
Regarding dollar amounts,
Yeah.
what is the range of
It'll vary.
grant funding?
Yeah. Like I said, we do tend to sort of spread the wealth, right? But like looking at our 2023 list, I'm just kind of skimming it right now. We've granted things as small as $400.
Do you have extras like?
Oh, I got plenty. Yeah, if you want to hand these out. All right, yeah, Tim's going to circulate. So we've funded, I mean, there's one on here for $400. I know we've funded smaller ones, like $250. And we've funded programs as much as like $5,000 or $6,000, sometimes $7,000, depending on the project. Because some projects sometimes they just cost more to do, or you want to bring in a speaker, and that speaker fee is like $1,200 or $1,500 or whatever. Yeah, we don't put a limit on how much folks can apply for, but we do usually get applications asking for anywhere from 2 to 3, it's more like 3 times the amount of money that we have. And we've been allocated $63,800 from the state, plus we're gonna have a little money rolling back to us from, this is the upside, when I mentioned earlier that 30 to 35% of the grants that don't operate, that money stays in Holyoke and rolls back to us if it's unused. And so we never lose that money, and it rolls back. So we're going to have a little bit of money rolling back in addition to that $63,800. And that amount is done per capita. So each city and town gets a different amount depending on the population. Yeah, question. Do we have the microphone, just in case?
Yeah. This will play on local channel 15 several times.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, oh no, we're being recorded, and I'm having a brain.
No,
moment.
that's totally. I know this feels very formal. This sort of like, let's have a PowerPoint. We're gonna have microphones and stuff.
Okay.
But again, like, there's a lot of stuff going on Holyoke tonight. The weather is not super great.
Oh, thank you,
Okay.
thank you, Anne, for helping me with that bridge. You were going to mention, I think, okay, if we don't have the money up front, how can we get that money
Yes.
and then get reimbursed by the
Yes.
local council? Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
And thank you.
So we use a form that is you can access it through the Massachusetts Cultural Council webpage. And on that form, there is a checkbox for third-party payment. And I love talking about this because that solves the question of like, how am I supposed to do this? Because traditionally what happens when we think about reimbursement grants, people are like, but I have to pay them and then the city pays me back in 4 to 8 weeks? That's a long time, especially if we're talking about like $1,000. That's a lot of money, right? So what you can do with what's called a third-party payment. So for example, let's say that I hire you in to teach a program in this event that I'm doing, right? You would send me an invoice for your time, your expertise, your travel, whatever. And then I would submit that reimbursement form with your invoice with that third-party payment. So that way I can submit it to the auditor and the auditor will send you a check directly without it coming out of my pocket. Yeah, I love this. Because that small little box on there, right? And you just tick it off. And I encourage folks to always get in touch about this too, because it's real. Like, part of the reason people apply for grants is because you don't have the money to pay this out of your own pocket. That's true. So yeah, we again put a lot of these forms and information up on our Facebook page as well. And so you can also always email into us as well. It's just holyokeculture@gmail.com, and we'll send the form out. And before I was co-chair, I was the treasurer, and I would sit with folks and help them fill out the paperwork because it's not particularly user-friendly on your first pass, and you kind of have to know about that third-party payment to do it. But yeah, it's totally doable. Something is beeping, and it's not me. Oh. I don't know. Maybe it's the battery. There is some mysterious beeping. I hope not. Although, I mean, we are kind of, if there are other questions or other points that folks have, this also might just be the camera being like, stop talking. Awesome. All right, so if we're good, we'll just kind of stop the recording at this point. And again, folks can check out the Facebook page if you have more questions, get in touch. And let's hang out and chat a little bit as well if folks have questions or if you'd like to just learn more about the council, because it is open to folks. We're always looking for new members. Thank you. Cool, thanks for coming.